Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and the numbered thrilling 30 hits its final entry with this fan-built bot at the deluxe price point. Windblade was created by Fan Poll Committee and now lives as a plastic toy, complete with a surprisingly strong role in the current IDW comic fiction. While I do wish she had awesome nunchaku rather than sword, she does represent a great many positive things for the Transformers franchise, and that gives this figure a pretty hardcore burden of expectation to shoulder. Windblade is a VTOL jet when she isn't all bipedal and humanoid. The outer ring of this mode looks pretty great, and then just suffers in its core. The fronts of her shins aren't really the problem so much as her feet, which look like they were meant to fold down at some point during development, and didn't. And while they all kinda flow with her various fins, the big hole in the middle is pretty egregious. But there is a solution. Her sword sheath can peg into the underside of her jet mode, filling out the gap, and preventing her rear landing gear from working, and jutting way out past her tail fin. Oh well. On the bright side, she's got the nice touch of rotatable and spinnable VTOL fans, though the spinning part isn't something you're really going to end up using very much. Being a jet, she's got front landing gear. Hooray! Also, she's got a Tamashii stage compatible port under her nose cone, which is a little too forward set for my tastes, but still works well thanks to her thin and flat construction. Speaking of which, she's got a nice profile for a Transformers Deluxe jet. There isn't a ton of underhang other than her arms, and for some reason even the semi-exposed hands don't bother me very much. It all hides under the wings and stays well out of sight for me. And you know, when it comes to jet Transformers, I'm pretty much like an ostrich. Don't let me see it and I'll forget it's there. And never flip my toys over. Ditching the sword sheath, Windblade's got a fairly creative take on a fairly rote jet transformation. Mainly, she does a bunch of stuff from the waist down to split, compress, and reshape a lot of the rear vehicle mass into her legs and hips. Unfortunately, I find her legs don't always tab together cleanly, though they do hold together alright. Everything else is pretty simple and predictable. I kinda wish her wings had some kind of soft detented locking points. Though their joints aren't loose, they always end up feeling a little bit messy and unfinished to me during transformation. And damn do I wish her nose cone ended up inside her torso rather than hanging against the back of it. Windblade looks pretty friggin' cool in robot mode, basically turning into a well-defined fembot with some Seeker-esque wings and fins and a conspicuous nose cone on her back. I think her proportions come off really well, and the combination of her high collar, the two curved spines raised behind her shoulders, and her crazy kabuki head details make her look like robot royalty of some kind. Speaking of that head, it's got a decent sculpt and pretty decent paintwork for what it's trying to do. Unfortunately, Sarah Stone did a way better looking face design in the Windblade miniseries, and this figure inadvertently suffers for it pretty hardcore. I'm curious to see how Takara Tomi's comics-oriented paint app patch works out in a few months. The rest of Windblade's paint is made up of pretty striking combinations of red and black, which smartly avoids trying to actually put red ink on black plastic, sticking to the far less blotchy task of emblackening red cast parts. Windblade's signature weapon is her big crazy sword, which comes in a big crazy sheath that kinda terribly sucks at attaching to either of her hips. It's an adequate connection that's subject to a lot of inadvertent banging, and comes loose really fast. You can also slot the sheath into her nose cone backpack, but that slot is so close to the cockpit seam that it too can get insecure. The sheath does have a straight up 5mm compatible grip, if all else fails, but it adds so little to the vehicle mode, I'm okay often just leaving it over there, off screen. The sword itself looks super goddamn cool, from its standout translucent purple blade to the little topical VTOL fan on its guard. It looks like a very creative teenager's original roleplay character's personal weapon, and I totally do not mind. So this lithe figure is still filled with joints, and up here on the head, she's got the still recurring theme of having a straight neck swivel and then like a separate hinge for up and down movement, which again means there's no tilt, but I think it works, and it makes good use of like the really thin neck that she's got. Her arms are on simple ball joints with a hinge on the shoulder pad, and on mine, these are pretty good. So are the hinges on her elbows, so are the bicep swivels, so are the wrist swivels. The wrist swivel's actually really tight. I'm glad this figure has wrist swivels. It's a figure with a sword. I want wrist swivels when I got a figure with a sword. Something I want to point out that's important here. A lot of my joint tolerances are pretty good on Windblade. That's because mine has the slipper style paint app on her foot. if you get a Windblade whose feet look like this, it's from the what appears to be revised version of the toy with slight tweaks to all the tolerances. The earliest Windblades came out with solid black feet, if I recall correctly, and they were the ones which were super loose and, like, barely able to stand. Anyway, continuing on, her wings, I consider this a point of posability because this is kind of a way to get her to emote more by having them, you know, wave up and down, flap in and out. The police are on the way, apparently. I didn't know I was... Okay, It's a windy day outside. Her waist is on a simple mushroom peg-style swivel. Her hips are on ball joints. Again, on mine, these are pretty good. They're not dead, rock-solid, like firm, tight in every position ball joints, but they're not ragdoll loose either, and if I really want to, I could get in there with some floor polish and tweak them up. Her thigh swivels are mushroom pegs. Her knees get a good amount of bend for what is ostensibly a single hinge, and her feet do not really move, because they're sculpted in this shape. Her heels move, and that's a bummer, because even with better joints, the one big problem this toy has is... now, I noticed this is a habit of mine, and I noticed this habit from messing with Windblade, because I'd put her down, and I'd do this thing that we all do, I'm pretty sure. If you just think about it, look at what you do when you play with a toy. Many of us, when we pose toys, we pose them, and we firm them down, we push down on the ground, and kind of firm them up, and then, you know, tweak them up here, and then firm them up, and then she falls over because her heels have folded inwards, like that. The thing about Windblade is, you gotta pose her up in the air, doing whatever you're doing, then put her down. Basically, do not push her down against the surface she's standing on, because the way that the heel works, if you apply a downward pressure, it's a good chance it'll bend in and all her support will be gone. If it clicked in up here, this would be a different story. It's a shame it doesn't, but that is the simple, easy way to get Windblade to not fall down and to not have her heels collapse, and is pose her in midair, and then put her down. If she's not standing, you know, tweak her, then put her down. And I've had a lot of success with this. It's just a hard habit to break. That say I want to put her, you know, I want to twist her waist and have her looking up. Usually I do this, and then I put them down, and I hold them down as I tweak poses up here, and that makes all that stuff screw up. So that's the trick I found with Windblade. Or, you know, if you want to skip all that, you know, altogether, just jam this in here, and now she's floating. And, you know, she's an airborne character. This works. And this way, she can't fall down because she's hovering in midair. And no matter how her heels are messed up, that can't affect her because, well, okay, the thing that can affect her is if you do that and wiggle her around a whole bunch and make her fall off the Tamashii stage peg. But, that aside, she is, like, made for these stand pieces. And if you don't have a Tamashii stage, they come in 3-packs, and especially if you dig the Windblade toy and want to have a good time with it, you should pick some up. I mean, I dig the Windblade toy, and I've had a good time with it. I've got Tamashii stage stays. You know, man, I want to tell you to just go out and buy Windblade. She's the first fan-built bot. She's heralded a fantastic new wave of female Transformers content in both toys and comic books, and she's got a very well-delivered robot design in plastic form. Unfortunately, even the revision Windblades are just frail in hand. Part of that comes from her aesthetics, but the clincher is the quality of her joints. All the tolerances are just slightly off. While I can go in and fix a lot of it with good old-fashioned floor polish treatment, to have to do that on more than a pair of points of articulation is a bit of a bummer. There are some pretty hardy Windblades that have been bought on the market, but I've also heard of just as many frustrating ones. And all cases of plastic tolerance aside, her easily collapsed heels are very hard to forgive. On the upside, I think she looks really cool, and the transformation's fun. When I have her on a flight stand, she's a fairly solid mid-tier Transformers Deluxe. For all her faults, I've found satisfaction in owning the toy, but if her visual design or comic book appearances haven't already endeared her to you, the toy won't bring anybody off the fence, let alone over it to the other side of happy folks who don't hate the character. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I have my fingers triple crossed that Takara Tomi's Windblade ends up with smoother and tighter joint tolerances, because if that happens, I think that version of the figure could be well worth everybody's time.